Okay guys, I'm going to try and get through this one fast because this one is really about speed. Compositing, gunfire, and other effects in Previz, super quick but with good results. The topic of this particular video is going to be trying to be fast. Speed when you're doing Previz is obviously vital. A lot of times we have to turn these things around really quickly, sometimes in the same day. But at the same time, you don't want to do amateurish visual effects in your work because it distracts from the product. People are going to be more conscious of the poor job that you did with the visual effect than what it is that you want them to watch, which is the viz itself, right? The choreography that you went through great pains to make sure was awesome and shot well and executed well by your performers. And now they're just looking at a crappy bullet effect that you put on the front of it. A lot of times we're trying to create a punctuation mark on a piece of choreography so that people understand very specifically what's happening within the scene. But at the same time, you want it to be subtle enough that it doesn't call so much attention to itself that they're looking at it going, oh, that's cute. The stunt guy did some VFX. Now, I'm going to be using some products in the course of this video that are not free. If you're doing this kind of work, you're doing it as a professional. And it's my opinion that as a professional, you should be paying for your tools. I'm not going to say that I've never pirated software, but I made a conscious decision many years ago that I should pay for these tools because I'm making a living using them. So one of the plugins that I use all the time for motion tracking is this one. It's called Motion Tracker Plus. It's available at AE Scripts, and I will be making a link to this and all of the others as well. This is a great tool, and I'll show you guys why in a minute. The second one that I want to point out here, it's a pack of stock visual effects elements from a company called ActionVFX. They're really great, high quality stuff, and I use their stuff almost exclusively. And at some point along here, I'm going to be pulling up FX Console from VideoCopilot. Again, speed is king when it comes to doing Previz, and I love this tool, and this one is free. Every keystroke, every click that you can save yourself is a valuable one, and so this is definitely worth downloading and taking advantage of. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing. I've got basically two sequences here that we'll be playing with. One of them was shot by the super talented Toney with Julian Maggio and Marc Canonizado. That's his first couple of shots here. This was like a spec project that they were doing, and they were gracious enough to allow for me to be able to use it. What we're going to be doing is adding a couple of gunshots into this first section and a spark hit on this block that she does with the back of the gun. The second section that we have here is one that I shot, and actually it's kind of goes against the grain for a lot of the things that I talk about, because you'll see that in it, Justin Eaton uses a kicking paddle to shoot Bobby, which, is kind of comedic, and 90% of the time it's not something that I would want to have happen. But in this particular case for this project, it wasn't such a big issue because I knew the director on the show, and I don't think that anybody was going to be too taken aback by the usage of the gun in this case. So with all of that having been said, let's jump into it. The first thing that I'm going to do is create a couple of markers in Premiere right where I want the gunfire to go. And this is something that I've adopted fairly recently because I've been working on projects where we've had multiple people that have been helping out, sometimes with sound effects, sometimes with visual effects. So it's helpful in this instance if I can create a marker so that no matter who's working on it, everybody's aware of where these effects are supposed to take place. So right here, you see Julia's hand start its move upward. So what I'm going to do is select the clip and hit M to create that marker. The second one happens right about here. And so I will hit a second marker. So those are my two markers for where those gunshots take place. Right here is where we would see that spark begin. So I'm going to go ahead and create a marker there. And then on this one, it's like right about there is where we would have the shotgun blast happen. Okay. All right. So my usual MO is to grab the clip. I'm going to hold down the Option key. That's on a Mac. Windows guys, you're going to have to figure out what you would hold down. I'm going to drag it up a layer so that I create a copy of that clip, and then holding the Control key, I'm going to click on it again and go to Replace with After Effects Composition. This jumps me over to After Effects where I already have a comp set up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come down to where I can see my first marker. That's where the first gunshot is going to go off. And come up to the rectangle marquee tool, and I'm going to double click on it, and this creates a marquee that surrounds this clip. Now I'm going to come over here to my tracker. If you don't have the tracker open, you would go to Window and scroll down to Tracker, and I'm going to track my marquee. This is the fastest, simplest way that I know to get pretty reasonable tracking data that works well for things of this nature: gunfire, blood, smoke, that kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be tracked pixel perfect. Okay, and I'm going to come up here to the aforementioned Masktracker Plus, which I have nested in this window, and with the mask selected, I'm going to hit Load, and then I'm going to hit Apply. Now, I don't actually want to apply this layer to the null that's been created by Masktracker Plus, so I'm going to deselect that, and I'm going to make the mask so that it's not affecting my layer. If I hit the U key, you'll see that I have position, scale, and rotation keyframes. And now if I go back over to my project window and go over here to muzzle flash, you'll see that I've got a bunch that are already loaded in here, and I'm going to pick one of the angled single flashes. Okay, the first one's going to be just fine. I'm going to drag that into my comp, and I'm going to drag it over into basically the right position. I'm going to hit the Y key, which allows me to manipulate my pan behind tool. Click V again so that now I can move it into position. I hit S on the keyboard and scale it down to an appropriate size, which is probably still bigger than real, but it's only going to be for a frame, so that's fine. I hit the W key for rotation, so this gives me a better angle on the gunfire. Now I'm going to pick whip to the null and turn on motion blur for the layer. I'm going to hit this toggle switches modes button, and I'm going to set the transfer mode to screen. If I take this now and drag it over here, you'll see that against this light background, it looks fine. If I have it on normal, then I'm going to get these dark fringes, and light is always an additive thing. Light is never going to make things darker. It's always screen or add, which makes it even brighter. So this is mandatory for me anytime I'm doing this kind of thing. Now, with this clip selected, I'm going to hold down the Option key again. I'm going to hit the open bracket and close bracket so that it's one frame. Now, if I was in a massive hurry and I had a gajillion shots that I needed to do and I needed to get this done, this would be the minimum and I would walk away from the shot. But I have a little bit more time, so I'm going to do a little bit more to accentuate this gunshot. First thing that I'm going to do is hit Command Y, which pulls up solids settings, and I'm going to click the color picker and I'm going to choose a color from inside of my muzzle flash. Now I hit OK. Next, I'm going to grab the ellipse tool and drag out a circular mask. I hit V on the keyboard, click it, and drag it into position. Hit F on the keyboard to bring up my feather, and I'm going to feather it like crazy. And now I hit T on the keyboard and drag the opacity down a little bit, and also set this layer to screen. Then again, I hold down Option, hit open bracket, close bracket so that it's one frame. And now this just creates a little bit more punch on that gunshot. In a daylight situation like this, you wouldn't get, that much of a flare going on around the gun. But like I said, if we're trying to draw a little bit of attention to this gunshot, then this is something that you can kind of get away with. It just makes it a little bit more punchy. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. Okay, so again, if time was of the essence, I might walk away from this one, but it's not, so I'm going to add some smoke. So now if I grab this first one, this angled smoke, and this is something that I was so happy that the ActionVFX guys created, was this pack of gun smoke, because it's awesome. Again, I'm going to hit Y for the pan behind tool. I'm going to grab this first frame, and I'm going to move it up into position around the gun. I'm going to set it to screen. I'm also going to track it to the null. Now, obviously, that's a tremendous amount of smoke, so I'm going to scale it down a little bit, like that. And in order to create a little bit more projection, again, the gunfire a little bit punchier, I'm going to hit P on the keyboard to bring up position. I'm going to create a keyframe, and I'm going to move that right back to the beginning where the gunshot happens. And now I'm going to drag this forward just a little bit, holding down Control on the keyboard. I'm going to click that new keyframe that's been created. I'm going to go to Keyframe Assistant and hit Easy Ease. So now the gunfire kind of carries out in front of her a little bit, right? Pushes. Last thing I need to do here is to go ahead and enable motion blur for that layer. Okay, so that's pretty nice. I think I might move that a little bit closer so it happens a little faster. Cool. And it's a little bright, so I'm going to hit T for transparency, and I'm going to pull that down, make it just a little bit more subtle. Okay, cool. All right, so now that I've got all that done, I have a second gunshot to do, but I'm not going to go through all that work again. I'm just going to select all of those, hit Command C for copy, Command V for paste. This reverses their stack order, so I'm going to go ahead and put them back the way they should be. And with the three of them selected, I'm going to go to my next marker, drag all of these over here, and now I'm going to reposition them. Make sure that my gun smoke and my muzzle flash are still parented. And there you go. And now if you wanted to get real crazy, you could replace this smoke with a different version of the smoke. If I click this with this one selected, hold down Option, drag it on top, it will replace it with a new smoke. And now we've got some variability there. It'll be a different smoke that comes out. Well, talking through this, it took a little bit, but in real time, that's maybe 2 minutes worth of work and a fairly, reasonable, realistic result. Okay, jumping back over to Premiere, we've got the first shot done. Now I'm going to grab the second one. This one I'm not going to talk as much on. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the work, which is essentially the same as what we did before. The only difference is that now we're adding a spark hit, and so there won't be the smoke, but the process is basically the same. That's about as far as I need for that to actually track for that spark hit, because it's only going to show up for a couple of frames. I hit apply, deselect it, set it to none, grab my spark hit, position it appropriately, track it into the shot. There you go. Now, if I wanted to get crazy, I might take a look and see if maybe there's a different spark hit that I like better. Let's try number 7. That seems to be matching the angle of his swing a little bit better, so I do like that one. Cool. Jumping back over to Premiere. Cool, 2 shots down. Okay, now we jump over to Justin shooting at Bobby. Replace that with an After Effects composition. Okay, now one thing that I am going to do here, the black bars are baked into this shot. I do have those black bars right here, so I'm just going to go ahead and drag that on top. That way none of our effects are overlapping and looking weird getting into the black area. So now I'm going to jump over here to where Justin is shooting him. Same process basically. So if I grab this, double click. Now, I should say there is a different method of doing this. I'm doing it the way that I usually do it. I generally start just getting my motion tracking information done. The way that this application is really meant to be done with Masktracker Plus is to put your asset in the timeline first. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that. It's just never the way that I actually do it. In this case, we'll use the muzzle flash from the front. This is a nice bright one, so I'll go ahead and drop that into position, do my forward bracket, back bracket thing to begin with, and I'll position it where I want it to be. Let's scale it up a little bit, make it, a nice big one. Okay, and now with my mask selected on track, as we did before, I go into Masktracker Plus, I'll load it, go back to the first frame, and now selecting this, I hit apply, and now it's applied the tracking data to the null object and parented this layer to that null object. That's the way that this is intended to work, and it's probably a more efficient way. It's just that my usual MO is to pull the footage in to start with, get my tracking data, and then start layering all my assets on top and connecting them. Anyway, that's the way that I do it. You don't have to do it that way. It's probably smarter to go a different direction. Okay, so now the issue with this one is that now the muzzle flash is happening behind Justin's head. So what I'm going to do is select the layer, and using the pen tool, I'm going to turn off the eyeball here so that it becomes invisible, and I'm going to draw a mask loosely around Justin's head and the copious hair that he has in the shot that I've had to mask around I don't know how many times in my career. It's more than once. Okay, now I'm going to hit F for feather, and I'm going to feather this mask just a little bit. Obviously, that's the opposite of what we want. So I'm going to click this menu, and I'm going to set it to subtract, so it's cutting out of the flare. Now there's more blur down here because of the nature of the way that his hair is flipping, just in the hair flipper. So I'm going to come down here, grab the mask feather tool, and I'm going to feather that one out quite a bit, and then I'm going to pull it in here so that we get a little bit more feather around, where his hair should be more transparent. Okay, and then make sure that we set that muzzle flash to screen. Now I'm going to create a solid, which is already the correct color from the last one that we did. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and create a nice big circle. Hit F on the keyboard to bring up the feather. Feather it out like crazy. Set it to screen. Hit T. Pull it back some. Option begin bracket and end bracket. And now we've got a little bit of a pop on that muzzle flash. Okay. Let's grab some smoke. Again, these are all steps that I might walk away from if time was of the essence. But if I can do these things, I will do these things. This smoke is going to be projecting out in the wrong direction, so I'm going to hit S on the keyboard. I'm going to deselect that little chain that connects the vertical and horizontal scale. I'm going to reconnect it, hit Y on the keyboard for the pan behind tool. I'm going to pull it over here, and then hit W to rotate it so that it's traveling in the right direction. I'm going to switch this to screen, and then I'm going to pick whip it to my null and make sure that motion blur is enabled for both it and for the gunshot. Great. Now, it's starting to go in front of Justin a little bit here, so I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of projection for it. This will help to make the gunshot a little bit punchier, but it'll also save me having to mask him at all. I'm just going to push it that direction a little bit. And as before, I'm going to hold down Control, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. Great. Next step is some gore. I'm going to grab a blood burst. They've got a ton of great blood bursts. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this. This should go behind the smoke. I'm going to set it one frame after the gunfire. We'll start to get this nice splatter going on. I'm not going to use the first frame. I'm going to start on the third frame by holding down Option and beginning bracket. It's kind of a good bit of splatter that's going on there. Now, one thing that happens with every blood asset that I've gotten my hands on is that they're always a bit crisp. If you look, I'm going to go ahead first and connect it to the null so that it's motion tracked in. If you look at the blood, the motion of the blood versus everything else in the shot, everything else has a lot of motion blur on it, but the blood does not. So by tracking it in, that's going to help. Now it's got a little bit of motion blur on it, but it's still sharper than it should be. So one thing that I always do, and this is where console comes in, I'm going to hold down Control and the space bar, which brings up my VFX console. And what's great about this is that you don't have to delve into any menus. I'm just going to type radial blur, and that's it. Now it's applied that effect. What I'm going to do is switch this to centered zoom, and I'm going to put a 10 blur on it. So now everything is kind of radiating out from the center of the clip, which just blends it in a little bit better. Okay, it's also very red right now by comparison to the rest of the shot. So I'm going to, again, hold down Control Spacebar, and I'm going to type hue slash, and I've got hue and saturation. I'm going to drop the saturation a little bit, and I'm also going to make it darker so that it blends a little bit more into the shot. This also makes it a little less offensive for people that may have some, concern about the level of violence, while maintaining a bit of a punctuation mark on the shot. Finally, I'm going to go back into my project and grab a bled mist. I freaking love these bled mists that ActionVFX created. They're awesome. Start from that frame. Again, I'm going to hit Y for the pan behind tool. That way, everything that I'm going to be doing in terms of scaling happens correctly. These come on a white background. I'm just going to go ahead and multiply it. And now with W, I'm going to rotate it so it's kind of headed in the right direction. Once again, I'm going to pick whip it to my null so that it's motion tracked to the shot. And I'm going to turn on motion blur for the layer. Okay. And that's it. I jump back over to Premiere, and there you go. Okay, so that's it. That's kind of my MO. I know that there's a gajillion gunfire videos out there. I just wanted to do something a little bit different that shows how I approach it for Previz, for speed. Still getting a pretty good effect, but doing it in a much faster period of time than I might do in a normal production environment where I was doing it as visual effects for final display. Okay, I hope that this was helpful for you guys, and we'll see you next time.